Hey everybody, Ed here with the Digital Digest, and today I wanted to share a quick comparison between the Sony Cyber-shot HX400V on the left and the Panasonic DMC-FZ1000 on the right. These are two similar yet quite different cameras. They're both bridge-style mega-zoom point-and-shoot cameras that are considered compact for at least the focal range and quality that they offer. Very different when it comes to the sensor size as well as lens pairing and especially price point, and that's because the Sony is a far less expensive camera. You're looking at a $499 retail for a camera that offers up to 1200 millimeters in zoom. Now you can see that startup time there, not incredibly slow, but also not the fastest in the world. That's something the Panasonic does have an edge over it, but that's not the real edge in this comparison. It's all about sensor and lens, as I mentioned. So you see we've got a 35 millimeter equivalent right there, 24 all the way to 1200. And then if you actually want to use Sony's clear image zoom, you can take this to a whole nother level. And that applies even more so if you use the digital zoom. And Panasonic does have their own version of that. I'll get to that. You can see we've got a LCD on the back. Pretty much the same resolution as the Panasonic. It does articulate, it does not flip around for self-portrait. You do have a multi-port as well as HDMI that is covered. This is not a weather-sealed camera. This ring right here on the lens can be used either for zoom or autofocus, much like the Panasonic, again, that I will be getting to in a moment. We have an electronic viewfinder that is capable but not OLED like the Panasonic. A hot shoe for accessories, a microphone array right here at the top for what I would say is basically par for the course when it comes to onboard audio for cameras in the bridge style point-and-shoot class. A flash that can be deployed right there with that button, which is fine, adequate, but really this camera is all about that zoom capability and then the fact that it does record exceptional 1080p video. A wide array of different bit rates, but they all reside within AVC HD. There is also a sensor in order to detect whether or not you're using the EVF for battery saving purposes. You can see we also have NFC and Wi-Fi, something that is also available on the Panasonic. And essentially just a far more affordable traditional mega zoom, a small sensor, basically standard for what you would get in the mega zoom class, and that's part of the price. Also, this lens that I mentioned before, you're not getting as fast a piece of glass as you are with the Panasonic. So Carl Zeiss branded, you can see the range right there, T-Star glass, very nice quality, and there's no question the actual stabilization, GPS, all of the bells and whistles that you could want that are here are really great to have in a consumer bridge style camera that's trying to do everything. Then if you want to take it up to the next level, really, that's where the FZ1000 comes into play, because here for $900, which is now really, I would say, roughly twice the price of this, because even though it's no longer $500 retail, I think, you know, on any given day you can find this a little over $400 on sale, and I'm sure it will eventually be $400. So as I mentioned, roughly double the price, but give or take whatever the sale is on any given day now with this. And also the FZ1000 will come down in price eventually. This is a heavier camera, no weather sealing here either. Instead of Carl Zeiss branded glass, we have Panasonic's partnership with Leica, which is definitely a very good alternative. Arguably, I would say the two best possible partners you could have when you're talking about glass. And this is actually a fast piece of glass. 25 to 400 mil, again 35 millimeter equivalency, but here we have a range that really is going to give you relatively bright results across the entire range. You can see right there f2.8 to 4, so not something you're going to get with the Sony camera. You're also going to get 4K video recording, and that's thanks to the 1-inch sensor inside here, which is considerably larger than the sensor you'll be relying on with the Sony HX400V. And that's where many will argue, including myself, that the extra focal reach of this lens is somewhat negated or compensated for by the fact that you do have a 1-inch sensor in here, which in theory gives you far more information, as well as the ability to perform better in low light situations, something that really the HX400V cannot do. Also, faster autofocus here. I didn't mention that when I was speaking about the 400V. The 400V, 10 frames per second continuous autofocus. Here we have 12 frames per second. And you can see just when I booted up the camera, much faster to start up than the 400V. You can see the range readout on the top of the barrel of the lens, very similar. A single ring on the lens, which again can be designated to either control the zoom or the focus. And it is pretty accurate. Whether or not you're going to want to use that or the actual toggle on the shutter release is really a matter of personal preference. That's why every manufacturer is pretty much doing this. And then you can see there is optical image stabilization, which is very good. On the video side, not fully enabled, wish it was, but still to have 4K video in here, which you do, something again that isn't available in the 400V or any other camera at this time in this class or at this price point. It captures 4K at 30p in MP4 format, 100 megabits per second, essentially the same equivalent as the Panasonic GH4. You have a 3-inch LCD here, which does fully articulate even for selfie purposes, really flexible and arguably superior as it should be to what's found on the 400V, even though they have the same resolution. Just the fact that this has a wider range of motion, pretty much standard for what we've seen from previous Panasonic cameras, already in my opinion makes it a better alternative when it comes to just the value of the onboard LCD. But the real big upgrade is that EVF. You know, if you use it, you're going to appreciate it. You have an OLED viewfinder here. I'm pretty sure it's the exact same one as the GH4, and that really does put this camera in another class altogether. Again, no weather sealing. It is predominantly a plastic body, more metallic than you'll find on the HX400V, but don't kid yourself, the 400V still has a considerable amount of weight because it does have a much bigger lens. It may not look larger, but the reach, as you saw before, is definitely much longer physically and literally. Now, as I mentioned before, because we have a 1-inch sensor here, that is going to afford you better performance across the board. That's how we get the 4K video. And from 4K video, you can actually, in camera, pull 8 megapixel stills. So that's another great advantage that this camera has over the less expensive 400V. No GPS here, but we do still have Wi-Fi and NFC on board. Time-lapse, not app, but mode built in, so no app needed to purchase. HDMI out right here. No line in for audio, or excuse me, line out for audio. We do have a mic jack on the other side. You can also see a remote port as well as an AV jack right there. And then on the other side, you have your line in, your microphone jack, but no way to monitor audio on board, which to me is not a big deal. Look, this camera actually records its own motor. It's still a consumer class product. This is not a pro grade product. Many will argue prosumer. I can make that argument without hesitation, but the reality is that if you want high quality audio, you should probably be recording it off body with a separate device, unless you do have gear to really accommodate the next level. So that shouldn't be an issue that it records its own audio. That's something this camera, the HX400V, will also do. But of course, because this has that 4K, it really is just far more appealing to just about everyone out there looking to grab incredibly high quality video. And that's not to say the 1080p here at 28 megabits per second isn't impressive. It is. It's just last generation when compared to what the FZ1000 has to offer in 4K. Unfortunately, the step down from 4K is straight to the highest setting we have here, the 28 megabits per second in AVC HD. Panasonic does not have anything in the FZ1000 like Sony does in their latest lineup of cameras with XAVCS, with a higher bit rate, a higher quality that is in 1080p. But still, once you have 4K, you really don't need anything else because you can always downsample that to whatever you desire, as well as I mentioned, pull 8 megapixel stills from it, which makes this camera in so many ways superior to the HX400V. But of course, the 400V fills a gap, and as it becomes less expensive and it even drops down to the $300 range, which will eventually happen to this model, it just is an incredible value for just about everyone out there looking for that bridge style camera, really especially the mega zoom clearly. But if you actually value the 4K and you care about having the best quality despite lighting, this is the better option. Of course, it's far more expensive, a lot more manual control here if you didn't already notice. The flash, believe it or not, about the same quality, not that much difference in terms of what they could really accommodate on body or what anyone would expect. You can always use externals. That is an option really for both cameras that we're looking at. But the menu system I definitely prefer on the FZ1000, but it's still clean here on the 400V. That's a move Sony made, which was a smart one. In terms of video recording, do keep in mind both are limited to 29 minutes and 59 seconds. They top out there. That's part of the structuring of digital camera sales here in the States, at least point-and-shoot class ones, as well as many interchangeable class as well. In terms of other things to warrant, battery life is actually, or note, battery life is about even on these models, believe it or not. Of course, the 1000 far more capable with what it does with that battery life. You will need special SD cards, something you will not for the 400V if you plan on capturing 4K video with the 1000, and that's because it needs a minimum write speed of around 65 to 70 megabits per second on card rating. So that's a UHS 3 rated card. I've mentioned this in my review, previous videos about this camera. Get ready to pony up some extra money for a faster SD card. Even if you have what was, this past year one of the fastest cards available, it likely is not one of these. So be prepared to invest some money. It's not a big deal, but something that I want to point out. So definitely both are compelling. Both have their place and space in the market. Both, I think, will appeal to different customers as well as overlapping ones, and that's why I'm sharing the video with all of you today. If I had to pick one, it would definitely be the 1000. The only thing that irks me about the 1000, and I've stated this through all of my videos, is that unfortunately when it comes to capturing 4K video, one of its biggest, I would say, and most alluring features, it starts out at 37 millimeters, which is really not the wide angle you'd expect when you're reading the top of that barrel that clearly states 25 to 400. The good news is you get almost 600 millimeters in reach, and that's where, as I mentioned before, when you use Panasonic's intelligent zoom feature, much like Sony's clear image, it'll take this out easily to 1600 millimeters, and if you actually take it down to lower megapixel counts, you can do all kinds of crazy things to achieve a similar result to what you arguably get here with a smaller sensor and much larger lens. So it really all comes down to budget. As I said, both are, in my opinion, good values, even at suggested retail. Of course, the FZ1000 has some inherent advantages that makes it the superior player in this matchup. Again, it comes down to whether or not you want to spend almost twice the amount of money. But that pretty much rounds it out. Both very solid cameras, good manufacturers. As far as firmware updates, because these are point-and-shoot, Cyber-shot, and Lumix, don't expect to see much from the manufacturers. It's not a habit because they tend to refresh these cameras every year. So just another note that you should be aware of. Any questions or comments, please feel free to post them. And of course, as usual, please feel free to subscribe. Later.